Hi everybody, my name's Brett Bryan. I'm Professor of Global Change, Environment and Society here at Deakin University. I'm here today to talk to you about our Local SDGs project. It's a project about a general framework for charting pathways to sustainability to future-proof local communities. It's all about taking the Global Sustainable Development Goals and downscaling them to the local level and implementing them at the local level, so that the more communities we can get on board, the more communities that we can chart pathways to sustainability for, then the better chance we have of scaling up and achieving the Global Sustainable Development Goals. But I'll talk more about those goals in a few slides. So this project is funded through the Ian Potter Foundation, and we're collaborating with Monash University's Sustainable Development Institute. So the project is a really strong collaboration between the university sector, the Ian Potter Foundation, and our two case study regions. So we've got lots of engaged local stakeholders at that local community level. So at Deakin University, we've got Aniat as a research fellow leading the research direction and implementation, and Katrina and Rehana as PhD candidates. At MSDI, we've got Shirin Malikpour, who's an expert in participatory processes, and Professor Rob Raven, who's worked for a long time in sustainability transitions. And they've got a PhD student, Dianti, starting up soon as well, looking at those the community engagement processes. We link also to sort of state government and national agencies like the Foundation for Regional and Rural and Regional Renewal, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, state government, Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, and the Commissioner for Environmental Sustainability. And our regions, our case study regions, the Goulburn Murray region, where we've got local agencies, particularly strong supporters through the North Central Catchment Management Authority, and the councils there, the River Murray group of councils, and also the MDBA. In forest and in the Otway Ranges region in general, we've got the Forest and District Community Group, but also other agencies like DELP, Great Ocean Road Tourism, Corangamite CMA, the local council, and so on. So it's really strong and designed as a really strong collaborative project where we work with people in order to chart pathways to local sustainability. So the SDGs, I promised I'd say more about these. There are 17 of them, and they're adopted by all the world's governments in 2015. So 193 countries have signed on to achieve these 17 goals by the year 2030. Under each goal, there's a number of targets and levels of achievement and aspiration, and a number of indicators as well that measure our progress towards achieving these goals. So the SDGs are really broad and span both socio-economic and community human development goals right alongside environment and climate and energy goals, so more biophysical and environmental type goals. So as you can see from this slide, they span hunger, poverty, health, education, gender, work, industry, inequality, and so on. But then there's the more environmentally oriented goals, so clean water, affordable energy, sustainable cities, so urban goals, responsible consumption and production, climate, life on land and life below water. So what we're doing is taking these goals and we're saying to local communities, Which of these are important for you? Which elements of their targets and indicators are relevant to this local area? What is a priority here in this region? And we work with communities to identify which of these goals they aspire to achieve, and then we align our processes towards adopting certain actions over time towards becoming more sustainable, achieving these important goals for the local community. So localising the SDGs, our plan in this project is to develop bottom-up plans aligned with the priorities of local communities. So it's really working with people. It's combining quantitative environmental science with state-of-the-art science in how to work with people, and that's called participatory processes or engagement, in order to develop up the best plans to future-proof our local communities. We want to acknowledge the heterogeneity of local conditions, so in heterogeneous geographies, demographics, economic and social conditions. So each community is different essentially. So what our goal here in particular is to develop a framework that works no matter what the characteristics are of the local community. So we're also working with a case study area in the Tiwi Islands, for example. So our case studies are so different that we know that if we can develop something that works across all three, we'll have something fairly robust that we can be confident can be applied and rolled out more broadly. And also we want to consider socio-economic inequalities, so the availability of resources and technical skills in planning towards sustainability. So also things like, is there a lot of data, a lot of historical engagement processes or strategic thinking? Is the community starting at zero? Is this their first effort at a community plan or strategic thinking, or have they had a long history in that kind of thing? So we've got a lot of background to work with and we can build on. So case study areas, one of the key case study areas is Forest, a little town in the top of the Otways Ranges in Victoria's southwest. So it's a local community which considers itself highly susceptible to environmental, social and economic effects of climate change. So they've got concerns around water management, so SDG 6, promoting sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, so SDG 8, and protecting and restoring sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, particularly forests. So it's a very beautiful part of the world. They call it the gateway of the Otways Ranges. The ecosystems are unique. It's an example of a tall, wet rainforest in a post-agricultural landscape. So agriculture and forestry has been declining for many years, and now the community sees risks and vulnerabilities, but also opportunities with changing socioeconomic and environmental conditions, particularly climate change. They also see strong risks around fire and vulnerability with a warming and drying climate. It's a really popular mountain biking location as well, and there's hundreds of kilometres of world-class tracks and trails. The Goulburn Murray region, so that's our second case study area. That's in Victoria's north on the River Murray. It's historically a very productive irrigation area, particularly dairy, but also some very unique and important environmental assets, food production, strong economic productivity, and also vulnerabilities from climate change with warming and drying, with less water availability, and with economic pressures on the dairy industry, as well as reduced water availability, meaning that industry is going through transition. So there's issues around sustainable economic growth and productive employment, SDG 8, sustainable consumption and production, SDG 12, and achieving improved nutrition and protecting sustainable agriculture, so SDG 2. There's just a photo there of the Goulburn Weir that we took the other day when we were up at a meeting in the region. Robust decisions need to be made to achieve sustainability amidst climate change and the deep uncertainty that is occurring or is presenting with medium and long-term futures. So we need to make decisions that will work no matter what. There's a range of different key drivers of socio-economic and environmental change, in particular climate change, but also economic uncertainty, things like trends in tourism and population and demands for food and ecosystem services. So what we focus on in this project is to identify with the community those options that we can put in place over time that enable them to achieve their goals in terms of sustainability, society, economy, and the environment, despite the uncertainty that's presented by these variable drivers. A key tool that we will use as part of our framework is called the Dynamic Adaptive Policy Pathways. So that works. This little synopsis here gives the current situation, and in this case here, the current situation has a tipping point or a sell-by date where what you're doing now won't be viable some short period into the future, and you can choose other actions, action A, B, C, or D. And we've got the time period there. Changing conditions happens over time. So that the black dots are actions or decisions that you can make over time, and the little black line there is a tipping point, so you can't go any further. That's a sell-by date for a certain change in decision. So there's the time period. That's what we're doing currently. We can't keep doing it because we know that changing conditions will mean that it will viable anymore, and there are other options that are presented to us. So for example, action A and action D, these are long-term actions, so they're viable into the future. They don't have a sell-by date that's foreseeable, and we can choose either of those. So instead of doing what we do now, we can choose A or D, and we'll know that it's a long-term option into the future. But typically they may be expensive, or they may not achieve the targets or the benefits that we're after. Action B, that is a bit more of a medium-term decision, but that also has a sell-by date, although we can expect to go twice as have a lifespan of twice as long as what we're doing now. So it might be just a short-term decision. So if we choose action B, it'll get us to a certain point into the future, and then we need to choose something else. So we've got A there, D, or even action C, which is another sort of medium-term decision, but it also has a sell-by date sometime into the future. So if we choose action C, then before its sell-by date, we've got other options. So in this case here, action B has come back online, or we could choose D or A, which are our long-term options. So B has come back online. It's had a period of not being viable. So for example, if we have a peak and decline situation with global warming, where emissions go up and then they come down again and temperatures follow, that might be an example of something that's viable now, not viable in the medium term, but then viable again in the long term when things settle down, hopefully. And also, I guess, back on option D, option C, sorry, it turns dashed after that use by date, so it's not effective in all scenarios, but it might be effective in some scenarios, so it has some risks. So as you can see, there's pathways through this policy plan, and you can, in this little legend here, it illustrates how you can choose different courses of action, and then there's a series of costs and a series of measures against whether it's met the target, so that it's sustainable development goals relevant to the local community, and whether there's any co-benefits or side effects, so trade-offs. So you can use identify these pathways or decisions over time, quantify the costs, quantify whether they meet the targets, quantify the trade-offs, and then come up with a plan for an adaptive policy pathway over time. So this is a very collaborative and participatory project that we're embarking on here, as I mentioned earlier. So the dynamic adaptive policy pathways is developed through this sequence of actions or stages or phases in our framework. So this is the overall framework that we might apply to forests, Goulburn Murray, Tiwi Islands, or any other region. And each stage can be adapted to the conditions of the local community or environment. We start off with a contextual analysis where we do a detailed assessment of what's been done before, what the local conditions are, what the peculiarities are of the community, of the environment, of things like how much data is available, and whether the communities had lots of engagement processes before and they're fatigued, or whether they're welcoming and are relatively new to these types of engagement processes. So we get to know the region, do our homework, and then there's a process of visioning where we work with an engagement stage where we work with the community to identify their aspirations and goals for the future, and also identify the sustainable development goal priorities. The second bit is on target setting, where we set targets for local conditions so that they have met the SDG as it relates to that local region. We frame scenarios with the region, so looking at uncertainties and uncertainty dimensions that may influence whether one decision or action works whereas another doesn't, or influences the ability of one pathway to achieve a target or not. Then a stage of problem analysis or gap analysis. So first of all, we work out whether what they're doing now can get them to their goal or their vision, or reach their sustainability aspirations. Now, if not, then we identify what actions are available for the community to progress more towards sustainability against their goals and indicators. We evaluate the actions, and although that's just one part of the framework there, it's actually a very large part, because that's where we model all the costs and benefits and trade-offs associated with doing different actions at different time periods under different scenarios. We identify those pathways and actions that are minimum lowest cost or a reasonable cost, where they achieve their targets and where they produce the most co-benefits over time, despite the uncertainty in our scenarios. We then work with the community in another contact point there to identify and select the pathways that are preferred, and then establish a monitoring system, and contingency planning is a stage where we have a number of fallback positions if things don't go as planned. And then with all that creates a dynamic adaptive policy or dynamic adaptive plan for the community, so they can then take that they already have ownership of it. They've worked with us to co-develop it and shape it, and then implement that and monitor it. So that can be through things like a town plan or a strategic plan for the region, or any number of sort of living community documents that govern the strategic direction of the community. So that's all from me. I hope you now have a bit better idea about what our local SDGs project is about. Of course, there's a lot more detail under the hood, which I haven't covered here today, so I'd encourage you and invite you to contact ENIAT or myself with the details there if you have other questions, or you would like to be involved, or you see potential to apply this project to your region. Thank you very much.